the night prior to the IED going off, we were put in formation, told, "Hey, we're not going home. We've been extended 3 to 6 months, and we're not staying on this base. We're going to a new base on the border of Iran." And so the next morning, we load the trucks were already loaded because we were prepared to go south to leave, but we got in the trucks and drove. I guess technically it's east towards Iran to a new base out there, and in the process, both of the convoys, you know, got hit. Uh, in that whole first deployment, none of our vehicles were up armored. There was no armor. We had guys. We did the typical way that we learned from our our predecessors, our Vietnam vets. Lining the bottoms of the trucks with sandbags and the sides of the trucks with sandbags as some form of protection.
Speaking of Vietnam veterans, in this video, I'm actually doing yard work for one. However, he was feeling a little under the weather and was unable to do the interview, but I still wanted to do the yard work for him and the community. So, in turn, the interviewee is actually from a different war, the Operation Iraqi Freedom. Let's hear his story.
Mike Marsh, 21 years in the Army as a helicopter weapon system repairer.
When you think of the Army out of your 21 years, what pops in your mind? Good, bad, or indifferent?
I guess what would pop out is just moments from both of my deployments to Iraq. But because a lot of things happened. When I was young in my career, I was stationed in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. The day the Oklahoma City bombing happened, I was 40 miles away, and the events of that morning are still fairly vivid in my mind of what happened. The day 9/11 happened when I was in Fort Polk, Louisiana. I don't know what it's called now, but
I think it's still Fort Polk, isn't it?
no, it changed names. I just don't remember what name it changed to. Uh, I vividly remember that day, as most people alive during 9/11 should probably vividly remember what was going on in their life at that moment in time. And then, crossing the berm from Kuwait into Iraq, that day is still, there's a whole bunch of things that are still there like it happened yesterday type deals.
Yeah. What was when you said cross from Kuwait to Iraq, crossing the berm? What does that mean?
Yeah. So the berm, it's basically, in between countries, you have imaginary lines, sometimes fences, sometimes other types of barriers. The the border between Kuwait and Iraq was basically a sand berm. It wasn't impenetrable. You drove down to a little dip and you came back up where they moved the sand, and the locals there knew that was kind of a choke point. So they knew if they wanted something from the Americans or other soldiers, that was a place to try to get stuff from them, whether by asking or by taking.
Yeah.
Because there were stories of local people, cutting open soldiers' rucksacks hanging off the outside outside their truck. Cut a hole in the bottom of it and let stuff fall out. Or a lot of the younger kids would always ask for the MREs because they wanted the candy out of it or the meal out of it or whatever. So,
yeah, I remember in Afghanistan, same thing. Kids would just kind of do whatever, and even during like live fire exercises, like we're out there shooting our weapons or whatever, they would run to the range
right,
to go steal all the brass from the ammo shells.
And they would take the brass and melt it down into trinkets to sell to people.
Yeah,
or sell it to someone so they could reload the bullets to be used for whatever purpose, whether good or bad.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Mainly during my first tour in Iraq, it's probably about the time I really stopped watching the news, because the news only shows you what they want you to see. All right, I don't remember what was big in regards to the war in Iraq because I was there, you know, 2003 to 2004. So pretty much in the very beginning of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and you always hearing all the bad stuff on the news, but the stuff you don't see is like, while pulling guard at the front access control point, uh, the local kids would come in with these really crude homemade brooms and offer to sweep the road, at our control point, for a few bucks a day, right? And they're just trying to earn money for their family or whatever, and other things along those lines. Like we had a group of contractors building us a laundry facility so we could actually stop hand washing our clothes and actually have them washed in a laundry facility. And the head contractor, used to be the equivalent of a sergeant major in our army, but in his, they found this picture buried in a pile of junk in this building they were clearing out of the previous ruler of Iraq prior to Saddam Hussein.
Mm.
And I walk up and this gentleman's sitting there holding this portrait, sitting on a step holding his portrait, with his eyes tearing up because he's remembering when he served under that previous leader versus how things were under I guess he wasn't the current leader by that time, but under his time when Saddam Hussein ruled the country. So you see all these little things like that we didn't have news stations on our base, so none of this stuff was ever recorded. But then you see the stuff on the news, and all you're hearing is all the doom and gloom. You're not hearing about the good stuff or the stories from the locals telling you, their past history.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
There's a lot of that, and firsthand accounts like that were humbling, and you get to learn and unbiased. It's his personal experiences. He didn't speak very good English, but the foreman did, and he was telling me what was going on. It's just little things you don't see. Now, there's a bunch of bad stuff, in a convoy driving down the road, and the bomb goes off on the side of the road, and dirt and shrapnel is bouncing off your truck. I still remember that day as well.
Did you have a soft shell or was it a hard shell? I know they had a problem with that in the very beginning.
At the time, we didn't have any hardened vehicles. Actually, the day prior, we were told we were scheduled to leave for Kuwait to go home. Our 12 months was up the night prior to the IED going off. We were put in formation, told, hey, we're not going home. We've been extended 3 to 6 months, and we're not staying on this base. We're going to a new base on the border of Iran. And so the next morning, we loaded, the trucks were already loaded because we were prepared to go south to leave. But we got in the trucks and drove, I guess technically it's east towards Iran to a new base out there. And in the process, both of the convoys, got hit. In that whole first deployment, none of our vehicles were up armored. There was no armor. We had guys, we did the typical way that we learned from our predecessors, our Vietnam vets, lining the bottoms of the trucks with sandbags and the sides of the trucks with sandbags as some form of protection. But the doors weren't hardened. They were just metal doors.
Yeah, probably even the soft shit, right? Were they metal or were they the plastic stuff?
I was in a 5-ton, so they had metal doors. The Humvee that I rode in when I crossed the berm into Iraq was soft-sided. There was no armor at all. I think the truck I was in didn't even have sandbags lining anything. So all that was a thin piece of wooden backboard, on the seats as any kind of protection. Or the canvas cover, so they didn't know anyone was back there. That may have, could have been a saving grace in that aspect. But on that day, though, we were all leaving, going to this new base, and the convoy ahead of us got hit by an IED. They cleared that out. Then our convoy, we were probably maybe 30 minutes behind them. Uh, and as we're going, the IED goes off. Fortunately, the insurgent that, or the IED emplacer, the way he put it, it caused it to blow straight up instead of towards the road. But it was still close enough. My truck shook a little bit. Chunks of metal were bouncing off the hood of my truck. And I think the container that was in the back of the 5-ton I was driving, I think it may have been peppered, had little dents in it from the shrapnel going off. Fortunately, no one got hurt,
That is good.
which is always good. But we were already in a bad mood because we got extended. We were already in that mindset the day before that we were going home and getting a chance to see family in a few days, only to be extended. The main reason behind all of us getting extended was the actions that happened in the Sadr City area of Baghdad when can't remember the guy's name, but the leader of that faction decided to attack a convoy that got lost, and then they did an uprising up in another area. So they needed the extra people in country to help calm that down.
I will tell you that 2003 versus when I joined. So I joined in 2007. I didn't get deployed until the end of 2008, maybe mid 2008. I'm sure there was a huge difference between the Wild West of 2003 Iraq invasion versus the Afghanistan 9 years later.
So yeah, when I went over in 03, we had nothing. I mean, it's to the point, technology was fairly decent in the civilized world in 2003. We had cell phones, the internet was decent quality. But in 03, when we went to Iraq, we all had to go back to actually writing letters and mailing them home. And we had one satellite phone that our troop had a certain day and a certain time where we could go up and have a 5-minute phone call on the satellite phone to call back home. This is we were still sleeping on cots under the stars with we had to use mosquito netting around our tents to hold off the bugs from carrying us away in the middle of the night. Between mosquitoes and sand fleas.
And camel spiders, probably. You see a lot in Iraq? Camel spiders?
We saw some camel spiders. I mean, they weren't like all over the place, but some soldiers had them as pets.
Yeah,
between the camel spiders and the emperor scorpions,
and
then soldiers being soldiers would stage a fight between the camel spider and a emperor scorpion. But the upside on the 2003 deployment, we got there with nothing. We eventually improved some of the buildings that were around us and turned them into barracks. We finally got a dining facility. I got there late March, early April. It was November time period before we had a dining facility. So our cooks were cooking for us, so we get one hot meal a day and 2 MREs. Initially we were there, we were well ahead of the supply line, so water was limited for water bottles, that is. We had to make our own shower facilities. We didn't have air conditioning. And then as time went on, everything started improving. We finally got a shopette where we can go buy stuff from AFIS. And we also let some of the locals come in and set up little vendor spots, little stores, so we could, buy stuff from them as well.
You guys have like a little bazaar on that base by the end?
Not so much. There was just buildings. There was like a strip mall type deal. a couple buildings worth of vendors and stuff. But when I went back in 2007 to 2008, living conditions were totally different.
Oh, I'm sure.
In 03, we bought a satellite internet system and we set it up so we had internet. So it made it, eventually made it easier to communicate back home. But of course, if something bad happened, we had to shut the system down, which is pretty standard anyway. That way, rumors don't spread before the truth gets out, and the families are notified if it was that severe. But in 2007, 2008, we show up the base we showed up at. There wasn't any tent sleeping. They had these things called CHUs, containerized housing units, basically a 20-foot mill van with a door, window, and air conditioner. So we had those. So you were, sleeping 2 to 4 to a room, depending on how that particular setup was. They had shower facilities there already. We actually had a movie theater. It just it was like I went to combat and garrison broke out was the joke, because in the first 2003, our bathrooms were wooden outhouses that had a 1/3 barrel, a third of a 55-gallon drum underneath the toilet seat with some JP8 in it. And you did your business. And then twice a day, some soldiers got the great experience of burning, all the waste.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite quotes was on my second deployment. One of the sergeant majors came out, and he's got all these young soldiers and NCOs standing around him, and he's just talking to them. And he asked a question, and he's like, "How many of you here have been on a ship burning detail?" And those of us that were in the unit or had deployed previously that had done that detail, we raised our hands. Then he looks at the other soldier and said, "If you've never done that, you have no reason to complain." Because by then, we had flushable toilets. At the location. We still had porta-johns, but things had improved. Life, for those of that stayed on the base, life had improved.
Yeah.
As far as living conditions.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean,
what happens outside the walls is totally different stories, but
yeah,
they were both 15-month-long tours. However, the timeline, but 30 months and 2 deployments was
3-year difference and a pretty drastic
2.5, 3 years in between.
That's wild to kind of think about how fast.
I mean, but even that first year, from day one to the day we left, the conditions on that base I was on improved drastically. And a lot of it was soldiers doing things. I always tell you, you always improve your foxhole. You don't just get satisfied with what you have. You always try to make things better. When everybody started doing that, in their own little areas, things got better.
I got you. So, I mean, I think I already kind of know the answer to this, but to kind of wrap this up so we're not on here for 35 minutes.
We're already at 38.
I know, but some of it will would you do it all over again, and why? Or why not?
I was just having this conversation the other day because my nephew's thinking about joining the Army, and I was talking over some things with him, but I was telling one of these young soldiers the other day, I said, I don't think I'd change anything. Because you learn from your life experiences. Yeah, there's crappy times in the military. There's crappy times in the civilian world, no matter job related stuff. But at the end of the day, you're a sum of all your experiences. Would I change it? No, maybe little things here and there, but I would still join the Army. I mean, I signed the contracts to join the Army on my 18th birthday. I I went down to the MEP station the night before. I was 17. I woke up the next morning. I was 18, and I signed the contracts that day.